I am working as an associate teaching professor in the Department of Psychological and Brain Sciences at Johns Hopkins. I did my PhD at Stony Brook University and graduated in 2011. And my concentration is in social and personality psychology with a focus on interpersonal relationships, morals and ethics, as well as well being and happiness. And I've been delving into a little bit of political psychology and social media research, as well as studying people's dreams, which was actually the topic of my dissertation. So I'm kind of all over the place. And I also have a podcast that I co-host with Manuel Galvan called A Bit More Complicated. And I have a column on Psychology Today called The Resistance Hypothesis. I'm a big podcast guy. I can definitely recommend a bunch. I'm also a big sports guy, so I listen to basketball and football podcasts, including Bill Simmons's podcast and the Low Post with Zach Lowe. Those are mostly focusing on basketball. And then I listen to some fantasy football podcasts as well, including the Ringer Fantasy Football Show and the ESPN Fantasy Football. I also listen to some psychology-related podcasts as well. I love Scott Barry Kaufman's podcast and Justin Lee Miller's awesome Sex and Psychology podcast, as well as Two Psychologists, Four Beers, Decoding the Gurus, Very Bad Wizards. So yeah, I do a lot of podcasts. As for reading, I'm in a book club, and our upcoming book is a Salman Rushdie book called Shame, and I've never read anything by Salman Rushdie, so I'm excited for that. I think in terms of sex advice, the best information I've ever gotten was just about basic anatomy, especially, so I'm a heterosexual man, and I wasn't born knowing about women's anatomy. So just knowing what is where, especially, for ways to, really maximize pleasure, was really revolutionary for me. And as far as relationship perspectives, I think I used to believe in destiny and soulmates and a lot of kind of metaphysical, spiritual relationship stuff that I let go of when I discovered science and relationship science specifically. And that made a huge impact in terms of my own kind of happiness and realistic expectations for relationships in my life. I'm reminded of Eli Finkel's perspective, the all or nothing marriage, which is the idea that there's a lot of advantages that couples can take it. There's a lot of, let me rephrase that. There's a lot of things we have now in society that couples in prior generations and centuries ago just didn't have. And yet we see on average couple satisfaction is declining over time. So it seems to suggest that both things are happening. And as far as what those advantages and disadvantages are, I think there's greater expectations on relationships now than there probably ever have been in history. Couples are expected to do so much for each other in terms of being their passionate, loving, romantic partners, and also a personal therapist, and also a partner to raise kids with, and also helping each other as individuals grow and develop. And so that puts a lot of pressure on one relationship, and it means there's a lot more potential that people have to maximize satisfaction, but also a lot of room for failures as well. So one thing that I want people to take away from my presentation is that when infidelity happens, when someone cheats on their significant other, it is not always because there is some underlying problem in the relationship. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. Sometimes people cheat even when they are highly satisfied and otherwise happy with their marriages or their partnerships. And I think another kind of related idea to that is the notion that when infidelity happens, it can and should be something that is monumental and significant in its negative effects, that it can destroy relationships. It doesn't have to. It can be a stressor that can guide couples in a negative direction or a positive direction, depending on how they respond. In some of my research that I've published recently with my colleagues, we found that when people cheat, it is not significantly associated with their relationship satisfaction or divorce and breakup rates in the long run, which means, some people, there's cheating and infidelity and they break up or their relationship suffers, but not always. I'm really excited to share my work and also get feedback from people in terms of what resonates with them and maybe get some inspiration for future research. But I'm also really interested to see how people might try to apply findings from my presentation and my research to their own lives and to their own practices, depending on their area of work, especially clinicians. I'm really excited to see from them what they find useful and what they find beneficial.